tonight.
It may not work out for June 12th.
I think that Roe is at stake in the Supreme Court and a lot else.
Rest in peace, Jae-in got killed right here by another mate of mine that killed him.
Two major advocacy groups are backing 10 women in 9 cities who filed EEOC complaints against McDonald's for sexual abuse, including a 15-year-old in St. Louis. The cases lay out allegations of groping, propositions for sex, indecent exposure, and retaliation. The US-North Korea peace talks haven't happened yet, but the White House military office has already minted the commemorative coin, referring to Kim Jong-un as supreme leader. Civil rights groups have blasted the Education Department for how it investigates discrimination in schools. Secretary Betsy DeVos tried to defend her stance.
Please explain for me what you would believe to be vigorous enforcement of civil rights in the context of schools today.
It would be following the law and enforcing the law as stated.
Okay. So how did you do it if you continue to try to dismantle and defund the office? I'm not understanding.
We haven't done any such thing.
Okay. I think I've heard enough.
Sony is going to become the world's biggest music publisher after spending $2.3 billion to own 90% of EMI Music Publishing. With streaming revenue on the rise, Sony wants to own more of the content. The purchase nearly doubles Sony's music library to more than 4 million songs. President Trump welcomed South Korean President Moon Jae-in to the White House today and threw some cold water on plans for next month's summit with North Korea.
There's a very substantial chance that it won't work out, and that's okay. That doesn't mean it won't work out over a period of time, but it may not work out for June 12th.
But as part of the preparations for those talks, North Korea has been saying it'll offer up a dramatic goodwill gesture this week, dismantling Punggye-ri, the site where they've tested 6 bombs and underground explosions, and they're letting foreign journalists witness it. The thing is, North Korea's put on a similar demo in the past, and it doesn't necessarily mean Kim Jong-un is ready to give up his nukes. On June 27, 2008, after years of negotiations with the United States and other countries, North Korea tried to show the world it was serious about striking a nuclear deal. They invited international media to watch them blow up a cooling tower at the Yongbyon nuclear facility, which had previously supplied plutonium for use in nuclear bombs. At that point, North Korea had only conducted 1 underground nuclear test, and that explosion was relatively small. Negotiations ended up falling apart in 2009, but North Korea was able to keep conducting nuclear tests, in part because they didn't actually need the cooling tower to build bombs. Over the next 8 years, North Korea tested 5 more bombs, and seismology data indicates that each was bigger than the last.
The first test was probably a failure, and it was really small in terms of the power of the explosive. It was only the equivalent of a few tons of TNT. The last nuclear explosion was a few hundred kilotons of TNT, which is to say about 10 times bigger than the bombs that leveled Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yes.
Lewis and his team used data from satellites and seismologists to create a 3D model of the test site and the tunnels below it. And what they found was surprising. The tunnel setup looked similar to the one the US used for its own nuclear tests in Nevada.
It seems like North Korea didn't reinvent the wheel, but instead went back to declassified American and probably Soviet publications in order to figure out how to bury and space their tunnels.
The last underground explosion in September of 2017 was so big that it created a massive cavity in the mountain, big enough to fit the Statue of Liberty inside. After the test, that cavity collapsed, which set off speculation that North Korea is just making a show of closing the test site because it can't use it anyway.
And as Kim Jong-un himself noted, and we can see in satellite photographs, there are 2 other large tunnel complexes into different mountains that are totally fine.
Another thing experts worry about is that North Korea will only close the entrances to the tunnels, which could give them the option of reopening the tunnels and using them later.
North Korea has dug these massive tunnel complexes into rock. It's not easy to get rid of them. My guess is that what North Korea will do is collapse some of the tunnels, maybe the entrances, and then seal them with concrete. That renders the test site unusable, but not forever, and it's not like North Korea has a shortage of mountains or people to dig new tunnels.
Recent satellite imagery shows that North Korea is removing buildings and equipment from the site ahead of the upcoming demolition. While that's not necessarily unusual, Lewis says it could prevent international inspectors from getting valuable information about the size and type of weapons that North Korea has used there.
Inspectors could have taken environmental samples in order to determine how sophisticated North Korea's nuclear weapons capabilities were. They probably would have been like kids in a candy store. I think that's probably why we see trucks at the site now carting all the good stuff off.
The tests that North Korea conducted there helped them build an unknown number of bombs. And now Trump is going to see what he can get out of the negotiation.
I don't think North Korea is going to give up its nuclear weapons, so Kim Jong-un needs to come to the summit with Donald Trump with some kind of gift, some kind of deliverable. I think closing the test site and promising not to conduct future nuclear tests is a pretty good thing that he can give Trump that will make the summit atmosphere more pleasant. North Korea closing the test site is going to look great on television. They're going to fly in a whole bunch of journalists who will set up cameras, and then they're going to blow up the entrances to the tunnels, which will make the mountains shake. It's great TV, even if it isn't really disarmament.
A wave of violent crime claimed its latest victim last night in Islington, an area of North London, where a 30-year-old man died from multiple stab wounds. There have now been 67 murders in London this year, 42 of them involving knives. The UK Home Office acknowledges that years of cuts to police budgets are part of the problem, and chronic underfunding of youth programs isn't helping either. What that means is that the communities where the killing is happening are having to act on their own to stop it.
The first death happened here. Yeah? And so right here happened. Rest in peace, JD got killed right here by another mate of mine that killed him.
Robin Travis grew up in Hackney. In the early 2000s, stabbings were rare here. He was 14 when it first happened to him. Do you know how many times you've been stabbed?
Five different occasions.
Robin spent his childhood in the middle of an emerging rivalry between two local housing estates.
Because for me, it was 24/7, there's no back down. And that starts from a young age. Do you want to be the victim or do you want to be the victor?
He wrote a book about his experience of violence growing up, hoping to shed light on the mindset that causes it, and he now hands it out to young people who he sees are at risk.
Enjoy it, yeah? After getting stabbed, that's when everything about you can change, because I was never a gangster, never a bad boy. There was no gang initiation stage, there was none of that crap. Friends from my estate, grew up together, got stabbed, things changed. At 14, you're meant to be thinking about what subjects you're going to choose for year 10. That's what you're meant to be doing. I wasn't doing it. I was planning how I'm going to kill this boy and get away with it. That fucked up my childhood, in a nutshell.
The prospect of being stabbed is all too real for young people across London. Robin regularly visits the Hackney neighbourhood where he grew up. These boys are still children. Because of their age, we decided to obscure their identities.
16 years on, what's changed?
Absolutely nothing other than social media.
Give me an example of how social media is used to fuel the violence.
Snapchat. Snapchat.
So if me and him had a fight now, he beats me up. They take out the phone, they record it. If he didn't record it, then he's only embarrassed between the people that saw it. If he's recording it, everyone sees it.
And from then it escalates, innit? Anyone can see it.
So how much of it is gangs got to do with it?
It's not always gang related.
Listen to that word, that's what the media told you.
It's mostly retaliation, innit?
Well, how much of it is just the reality of growing up for people?
No, it just all depends where you go, who you chill with.
Yeah, because if you live in Hackney, you live where it happens, innit? This is where we live, this is where it happens, innit?
They've grown into it though.
Who here thinks that it's a possibility that they could get stabbed?
Of course. Everyone can get stabbed. Anyone.
I'm doing that now. Bro. After this, we walk in shop, done. Simple, easy, quick. Nowadays, you have to carry a knife, either involved or not, because if you're chilling with or you're hanging around with others that have a problem with someone else, then you're automatically involved with that. So if you're walking with your mum, walking Dalston or wherever, shopping, your target if they see you. It's it, really.
Robin runs a weekly boxing class.
KPF. Cayenne Prince Foundation. Mark, sir.
Today, former pro boxer Mark Prince is helping out. Mark lost his 15-year-old son Cayenne in 2006. He was stabbed to death outside the gates of his school while trying to break up a fight between two boys.
How have you come to understand and view the tragedy that happened to your son?
First, understanding it is accepting it. And that's very difficult for every parent to do. You're not going to see your child again. But once I accepted that, I began moving on. Okay, so I can now say, okay, so what's my role? What? 2, that's the second one. Okay, 1, 2. So when you're walking, I realize that a lot of our young men don't get enough praise. Good, now do your 1, 2. And that's what I was injecting into that young man. And I used that little training session and that connection we had to let him know, you're special, you're different, you set the trend, you're in charge of your life and the direction it goes.
I can't do that.
I asked those boys, who here knows someone who's been stabbed? And who here thinks it's a possibility that that could happen to them? And they all put their hands up.
Wow.
Describe that to me. Why is that the case?
That's so sad, man, because they fully understand. People just don't value their own lives. They don't have that respect. They don't have that self-esteem. They don't have that self-identity for themselves. And they know at any point at all, when they're on the roads, they could bump into that kind of person.
Fear's controlling us. It's the reality of it. So we just need to be honest in the community.
What are the common misconceptions about knife crime, particularly children stabbing other children?
I don't know about knife crime. That's all I can say to them. All I know about is being in prison to the street and having that mindset of wanting to hurt someone because you can't beat them. Fuck knife crime.
Today, the House passed the Right to Try Act, a bill designed to give patients with life-threatening illnesses more access to experimental drugs. For the first time, they can petition drug companies directly without having to go through the FDA. It's been a huge priority for Vice President Mike Pence since his days as governor of Indiana. And President Trump gave the idea primetime billing in his State of the Union.
People who are terminally ill should not have to go from country to seek a cure. It's time for Congress to give these wonderful, incredible Americans the right to try.
Former Navy pilot and ALS patient Matt Bellina has been fighting for right to try since 2014. We first spoke with him 2 years ago.
It's ridiculous. I've been, on and off risking my life for 10 years. Let me try some drugs that are going to potentially help. I'll take the risk, and I'm not scared of it.
Matt's since lost the ability to dress, bathe, and feed himself. But he was there to see the bill pass today and thinks it could remove the paternalism that currently dictates who gets access to certain drugs and who doesn't.
Right to Try bill allows me to negotiate with pharmaceuticals outside of the purview of the FDA. Right now, I really want to try a cell-based therapy called Neuron out of Israel, and I have not been able to get it. We don't know if it will work, but we know if I try nothing, I'm going to die. I have no other options.
But while right to try sounds great in theory, in practice it raises a host of complicated ethical problems.
90% of drugs that start testing in human subjects are eventually going to fail. So what this bill is trying to do is saying we're going to make these drugs accessible to the patients who need them before we can determine whether they actually work or not. You could argue certainly that if you have a life-threatening disease, you are less concerned about side effects, but if the side effects are severe enough that they reduce the amount of time you can survive, then that's significant.
Right to Try also makes it sound like patients will now have guaranteed access to experimental drugs. They won't. Patients will now be able to petition drug companies without the FDA getting involved, but pharma companies like Brainstorm Cell Therapeutics, which makes the drug Matt wants to try, will still decide whether or not to make their drugs available to patients.
We're a very small company, 25 employees, doing a very complex, big trial. We're not one of the big pharmaceuticals. They're able to focus in so many directions at the same time.
It remains to be seen whether the FDA will be cut out of the process completely. But patients still think they're in a better position today than they were yesterday.
I believe that in the beginning, most pharma companies are going to be very reluctant to do this. We're going to have to be the ones driving this and getting them to participate.
President Trump will spend his evening speaking at the Susan B. Anthony List Campaign for Life Gala. And just in time for the speech, the administration announced that it's moving to ban certain federal funds from being used at any health organization that performs abortions. Planned Parenthood knows it's a target of that policy, and it says the change would be, quote, an attempt to take away women's basic rights. Planned Parenthood doesn't shy away from these battles. And for the last 12 years, Cecile Richards has been the group's general.
Thank you for everything you've ever done.
I love you, by the way. Thank you. And your mom.
She's tenacious and she's articulate. But on May 1st, she stepped down in the middle of some of the toughest fights that Planned Parenthood has ever taken on. One of the first people who tried to defund Planned Parenthood is Vice President Mike Pence. Wouldn't this be sort of the time to keep on going with the experience that you have?
Well, so I've been doing this job for 12 years, and which is longer than I ever actually thought. I mean, it's a long time. And I feel like the organization actually, perhaps mainly, or perhaps in part because Mike Pence is the vice president, this organization is stronger now than ever. There's never a good time to leave in the sense that, you know, and particularly it's hard to leave an organization like this or a job like this. But I also felt like we've invested in a whole generation of leaders, and it's important to step aside and make room for them.
Talk me through that just a little bit more. Like, why right now? 12 years?
12 years. It's like, you know, I think that's like three presidential terms or two Senate terms, or, you know, it's a long time.
Her time at Planned Parenthood has made her very recognizable. But she points to this as the moment when people actually found out who she was.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
That congressional testimony gave millions of people 5 hours of an insight into two things. One, who's in charge of Congress, and it was horrifying for a lot of people, and particularly women. And two, for a lot of people, they learned a lot about Planned Parenthood and what we do. We're proud of the health care that we deliver every single year, despite the animosity by some. The more those guys got mad at me and threatened me, and then the veins in their head started popping out. I said sometimes people change their opinions.
No, it's not always what you say. Sometimes it's just what you mean.
I was like, wow, I gotta chill on this because they're actually doing my job for me.
So then, do you think one of the ways to kind of solve the problem is to publicize Planned Parenthood even more?
100%. In fact, I would say every time people focus on what we do, it's the best.
Good morning. I'm Rick. I'm the manager.
Yeah,
How you doing?
Rick, thank you. So, are we gonna look around?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, fantastic.
Is the organization more political since you took it over?
I would say our movement is stronger. 12 years ago, one of the reasons I believe that I was hired was that we are an expert at providing reproductive health care. That is unassailable. But increasingly, it was difficult to provide that care because of the political attacks on reproductive rights. And I think we have built a much stronger organization to take those on at the state and the federal level. The organization actually is more popular now than it's ever been before.
Popular may not be the right word. Planned Parenthood polls okay. A recent NBC Wall Street Journal poll found that 52% of Americans have a positive view of the organization. And while public opinion on abortion has steadily become more favorable, in 2017, Pew said 40% of Americans still think it should be illegal. The week Richards was signing books in Arizona, the Arizona legislature was debating a budget bill that could direct funds away from Planned Parenthood, and they just sued the governor of Iowa over the 6-week abortion ban. People are going to keep putting bills out there, they're going to keep making laws, it's going to keep going to the Supreme Court until they figure out a way to overturn Roe v. Wade, basically. Well, that's what it seems like it's moving towards.
I do believe Roe is at risk, and that this president, I mean, there are a lot of things that this presidency can't do, isn't doing, or it's unclear what they're doing. But in terms of reshaping our federal judiciary with some of the most right-wing judges appointed now for a lifetime, they are doing that. And I absolutely agree. I think that Roe is at stake in the Supreme Court and a lot else. But I would say in the last 12 years, we've made enormous progress.
So you think you're winning?
Some days you win, some days you lose. But I think in terms of the long haul, we're absolutely winning. And if I were like stepping back and just try to look at the big sort of the big picture, I think the Republican leadership in this country is on an iceberg that is getting smaller and is floating out to sea.
Sometimes that leadership reaches out to Richards. In February of 2017, Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump invited her and her husband to an awkward breakfast at Trump's Bedminster golf course. In her book, she described a proposal Kushner had for her. Quote, "If Planned Parenthood wanted to keep our federal funding, we would have to stop providing abortions. If we would agree to that, funding for Planned Parenthood might just increase." Kushner even offered to talk to Speaker Ryan about it. Did you ever consider thinking through whether that deal was feasible?
I would say to Jared Kushner's proposal that he didn't suggest you separate it out. He suggested Planned Parenthood quit providing abortion services. But it doesn't matter. However you describe it, essentially what he's saying, I believe, is abortion is different. Somehow it should be different for people. And what we believe at Planned Parenthood is that a patient who comes into our doors should get the same treatment, should have the same opportunities, no matter what they need.
Is there a world where you could be like, okay, government of these states, you don't want Planned Parenthood, we'll take our resources, we'll take our access, we'll go to states that aren't trying to attack us?
No.
Why not?
Because I come from Texas, and I know what it means for the patients that we have in Texas to be able to come to Planned Parenthood, and there's no way we're going to walk away from them. If Planned Parenthood walked away, there wouldn't be anybody there.
Richards may say the sustained conservative attack on abortion and Planned Parenthood is just them playing short-sighted politics, but she also admits it's kind of working.
I guess if I were to project ahead, there are going to be states where it's affordable, available, legal, women can, without stigma, without shame, and there's going to be states where it's really hard. And I know, look, a lot of our politicians want it that way. If a woman is determined to terminate a pregnancy, she's going to do it whether it's safe or not. And the women that it's going to fall upon are the ones who have the least access to medical care. That's what keeps me up at night and is, nobody's free till everybody's free. And right now, that's the way I think this government is going.
Fucking awesome. That song made me realize what a huge dick I am. Oh, Parent Scaring Rock is some of my favorite. They do the bass drum thing that we always refer to as airy horse farts. And it always makes me laugh.
Once something dies, that's it, it's dead, I gotta let it be. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, I'm just the tie-dye dragon.
Sounds like some confused young white dudes. That song is an amalgam of so many things. Poppier, kind of melody-based, alternative or independent music that has come from the land of the Pixies forward. Like, my own bands are like that too. I cannot tell you who that is, though.
It's the Front Bottoms.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've been in the desert for years. Time to get us out of it. I climb outside, I carved ideas in a tablet.
Well, obviously off the top, it's the old Sesame Street song, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's something about dudes talking about religion, even if they're talking about how stupid it is, that turns me off so hard that I can't. And I listen to it, like really listen, and I'm like, okay, this is really clever. His cadence is really good. He's excellent. I feel like a dick. And I am a dick, but I'm just fatigued on the topic in general.
Might need me a refund. I'ma need that time back.
Damn, why are you playing with me? You don't even like girls, huh?
It's good. It's a good dialogue. I like that people talk to each other again. Hearing these two people kind of telling the other, I'm confused. Well, this is what I'll take. Here's my boundaries. This is what I'll do. That was really cool. That's what you want young people to hear. Way to be.